Hello, everyone. I can't see how many people at the moment have been coming into the room, but welcome to everyone who are just coming in now. We're going to give it a few minutes before we kind of start properly to make sure that everybody's in at the moment. We have more, actually, just been told we have more than 50 people already come in. We've had, I think this is right, about 150 people register for this event, certainly over 100, which is fantastic. And we're hoping as many people as possible who registered will be able to attend. Somebody's worked out how to do the yay clapping hands, which is fantastic. You can, of course, use them right the way through the session. We've got another one just going there. You can use them through the session. 73 people, I've been told, now are coming in. Oh, and we've even got a love heart. How great is that? We've got a love heart for having some hustings here. So I'm just going to give it one more minute, and then I will formally kick-start us off. Just to let you know, I'm Peg Alexander. I'm moderating. I'm the Michelle Hussein of this evening. I'm moderating this session. So we'll just give it one more minute, and then we'll get going. So I think let's start now. If people are going to come in and join us, they can join us as we get going. Brilliant. Shelley has come in and said hello. So again, if anybody else wants to kind of say hello, do that into the chat as well. Please feel free to do that. So let's get going. Before we meet the candidates, before we start the debate, though, we have got someone very, very special who is going to kick off this event for us, because Mohammed Hussein, who is the Leeds Children's Mayor, is going to actually kick us off. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into 3 questions that were the most popular questions submitted in advance. And just to let you know, they are on the subjects of transport, economics and leadership. So you don't need to post questions about those in the Q&A box. We're going to cover those. But throughout the event, please do keep posting your questions using the question function, and we're going to be getting you to vote. And I'm going to then ask the most popular other questions that come through. I'll explain that again in a minute. But first, I do want to turn to Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed, who's there. Do you want to put your mic on, Mohammed? Brilliant. It is so fantastic that you have joined us here this evening. You are the Leeds Children's Mayor. So please, can I hand over to you to officially start these hustings?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mohammed Hussein, the Children's Mayor of Leeds. Thank you for letting me speak today. I want to talk about something important to all of us children in Leeds: climate change. Climate change is a big problem. It affects everything: our air, our food, even our weather. Us children will have to deal with the consequences of what adults decide now. That's why it's super important for us to do something about it. As Children's Mayor, I believe we can all make a difference. We need to work together, understand how our actions affect the environment, and try to make things better. Small things we do can add up to make a big difference. We can start by telling everyone why it's so important to take care of our planet. Learning about climate change helps us know what we can do to fix it. It's also about getting everyone involved, children and grown-ups. We can do things in school, in our neighbourhoods, and with our families to make Leeds cleaner and greener. That way, our city will be a healthier and happier place to live. We also need to ask our leaders to make laws that protect our environment. If they listen to us and make good choices, we can make a real change for our future. As your Children's Mayor, I promise to work with all of you to make Leeds better for everyone. Let's work together to fight climate change and make a brighter future for all of us. Lastly, good luck to all the candidates in the upcoming election. I hope you can make our community even better. Thank you.
Oh, Mohammed, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And I have to say, there is so much love for you and for everything that you've just said coming through in the reactions. People keep those reactions coming because you'll be able to see them now, Mohammed, now that you've done your speech. So much love coming through. Thank you. And such sage words for all the candidates there. As you said there, as children, you're the ones who are going to have to deal with the impact of this. You want Leeds to be cleaner and greener, healthier and happier. So listen and make good choices is what your plea was at the end. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Please feel free to stay with us and thank you for everything that you're doing for children in Leeds. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. That was just so great there. Right, it's time to introduce our candidates. Before we do that, I will introduce myself again. My name is Peg Alexander and I'm a broadcaster and journalist here based in Leeds, but covering the whole of West Yorkshire and covering Yorkshire. You might see me regularly on national telly. You might listen to me on radio. It's my job to keep us on time tonight and my job to kind of occasionally probe some of the candidates with what the things that they've said against some of their manifesto commitments. So that's my job tonight. Let me introduce the candidates. Now, I have to say that we invited the Conservative Party, we invited Reform UK, and we invited the Workers' Party, but they have not tonight sent representatives. But the parties who have sent representatives, let me introduce them all. Let's bring them all on screen if we can. We have Chris Foren from the Green Party. Chris is standing in Leeds Central and Headingley. We have Alex Sobel from the Labour Party. Alex standing also in Leeds Central and Headingley. We have Chris Howley from the Liberal Democrats. Also, we've got a bit of a Leeds Central and Headingley massive going on here. Chris Howley for the Liberal Democrats. Matthew Leese is standing in Sheffield. Unfortunately, no Leeds candidates from the Social Democratic Party were available, but we're very glad, Matthew, that you could attend. So thank you very much on behalf of the Social Democratic Party. And we also have Bob Buxton from the Yorkshire Party, who is standing in Leeds Northwest. So at least a different constituency there. So thank you all so much for agreeing to be part of this. Now, just to remind you how this is going to work, we have 3 questions submitted in advance. I'm going to be asking them. There's also the questions, and I can see that lots of people are posting questions as well in the Q&A box. Brilliant. You get opportunities to vote, so we will be picking the most popular ones of those. Each candidate is going to get 2 minutes to answer the questions. And that will follow a 2-minute statement that each of them have. Now, I've been given the order by the organisers as well. I should just say actually that this event is organised by a coalition of I think 15 or 17 different organisations in Leeds. So it's been fantastic work from everybody coming together to organise this event. So thank you very, very much for that. So as I say, I've been given the order, and the order we're going to go for the opening statements is we're going to go Green Party, Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, Social Democratic Party and the Yorkshire Party. So without further ado, could I ask Chris Foren to do his 2 minutes, please, on behalf of the Green Party?
Yes, there is so much in the Green Party's manifesto 2024 that all I'm going to do is pick out a few bullet points and just headline things. So on power generation, we want to phase out fossil fuels and we want to cancel the new oil drilling licenses, including Rosebank, end subsidies to oil and gas extraction, introduce a carbon tax on all fossil fuels, whether obtained here or imported, cease development of new nuclear power. On insulation, we propose to spend a massive 29 billion over the next 5 years to insulate houses, another 4 billion over the next 5 years to insulate public buildings, i.e. schools and hospitals, and another 9 billion over the next 5 years to introduce more heat pumps. On transport, we want to increase the subsidy to rail and bus to £10 billion annually by 2029. An additional 19 billion, I did say that it was ambitious, over 5 years for improvements to public transport, walking and cycling. We want to empower local authorities to run bus services. We're opposed to new road building plans. We think there are enough roads already. And on aviation, we want no net expansion of aviation, and we want to impose a frequent flyer levy so that those who fly most start to pay the true costs of aviation. On nature restoration, we want to set aside 30% of UK land and sea by 2030, spaces in which nature will receive the highest grades of protection. Renationalise the water companies, and to resist any rollback of existing protections, for example, the Green Belt, SSSIs, areas of outstanding natural beauty, etc. I don't know how far I've got into my 2 minutes, but that's a very brief tour of the Green Horizon.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks very much for that. So can I move straight on to Alex Sobel for the Labour Party, please?
Hi, yeah, I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Alex Sobel. I have been the Labour MP for Labour and Co-operative MP for Leeds North West for the 7 years up to the call of the election, and in fact, I've been a climate activist for 30 years this year. In 1994, I was a founding member of Green Action at the University of Leeds, and then helped found the Green Action Food Co-op. While I was at Leeds City Council, I was the lead on climate sustainability on the council and helped do a number of improvements in the city. For instance, the solar roofs on council housing, council buildings, that was a scheme of mine, as well as other things. And since I've been in Parliament, I've chaired the Net Zero group in Parliament, and also I'm the promoter of the Climate and Nature Bill in Parliament. Before that was called the Climate and Ecology Bill. I was going to be the original promoter of that, but I got promoted onto the Labour front bench, and so Caroline Lucas took the bill, but it's returned to me in this new form as Climate and Nature. But while I was on the Labour front bench, I was the Shadow Nature and Natural Environment Minister. In terms of Labour's manifesto, I'm going to give some quick highlights because I'm sure we'll get into the weeds of this during the whole hustings. So we're going to set up Great British Energy, which is going to be a publicly owned energy company. It's going to be a renewable energy producer, and it's partly obviously about reducing our emissions, but also about reducing people's bills and energy independence and independence away from oil and gas. We're going to have a green prosperity plan, which is going to have transition and a green industrial strategy. We're going to create 650,000 new high quality green jobs. We're going to have a £13 billion insulation retrofit scheme, which is going to slash fuel poverty and reduce emissions. And we're also going to bring the railways back into public ownership, and then also support everywhere in England to bring buses back under public control, so the combined authorities, and Tracy Braben has started this process, can choose the routes, the fares, so we can have an Oyster-style system everywhere, but obviously...
Oh, hello. So I think we've lost Alex's coming. I think we just lost your Wi-Fi connection there, Alex. But
yeah, it's a bit shoddy here, I'm afraid. Yeah,
but you've hit your 2 minutes anyway, so that's good timing for that to come up. Thank you very much. Let's go to the Liberal Democrats, Chris Howley.
Thank you very much. I am Chris Howley. For 4 years, I was a Leeds City Councillor representing Wheatwood. Coming into this today, the thing that resonates with me most is that in the run-up to this election, the subjects I've had the most emails on are climate change and people's concern for that, which on the one hand is very worrying, but on the other hand is very pleasing that so many people are so concerned about it. And it is at the heart of the Liberal Democrat manifesto. We're committing to reaching net zero by 2045 and meet the UK's commitments to the Paris Agreement. And as you've heard from both Alex and Chris, we're ticking a lot of the same bases. We want an end to fossil fuels. We want a strategy on transport that is more environmentally friendly, promotes public transport, broadens prepay systems and travel card systems across the various forms of transport, investing in rail in the north of England. We want to free up planning for renewable energies, invest heavily in insulating homes and providing renewable energy sources, and offer similar support for businesses. Decouple electricity prices from gas so that electricity prices can move independently of what happens with international gas markets. I could go on, and as Alex said a moment ago, there's a lot more that I'm sure will be talked about. Personally, I'm here because this is a subject that matters a huge amount to me, and I do really feel that in the last few years, government has completely missed the opportunity to lead on this, and we really need to return to being a world leader in this area.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. That's great. Can I just remind people to put questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat? And also for people to be voting on the questions, because we're going to take the order of the questions based on the ones that you want the answers to the most. So please make sure that you do keep voting on them. If you put questions in the chat, can you copy them over? Because we won't pick them up from the chat. Thanks ever so much. Next up is the Social Democratic Party, Matthew Leese. Now, Matthew, I'm not sure whether you're able to use your camera, so we might just only hear you. Ah, right, okay. Matthew, are you there? Right, we've got no response there from Matthew. So, Rob, are you there for the Yorkshire Party?
Yes, yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Okay, so tell you what, let's come to you now, and if someone can send me a message to work out what we're doing for the Social Democratic Party, that would be brilliant. But Bob Buxton from the Yorkshire Party, your 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I represent the Yorkshire Party in Leeds North West. I'm also endorsed by the Climate Party. They're a centrist party, I believe in pragmatic arguments, as was the Yorkshire Party, to improve the environment. I'm going to tell you a story about this evening for me. So I used to take the train back from work. I can't because the station's closed due to landslip, and it's taken them half a year and counting to put that right. The second choice would be using Bradford interchange. You can see all the bus service, all the information. Nope, that's crumbling, that's falling apart. So I had to guess which bus stop the bus will be stopping at or not. The first one, of course, just didn't arrive. It's counted down. So I just got here just on the dot of 7 o'clock. I can't then go to my friends and colleagues and say, you know what, you don't need to drive. You should try public transport. I can't say that because it's rubbish. And the opposite happening, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I need to just bite the bullet and learn to drive. If you want people to use greener transport, it has to be good. It isn't good in Yorkshire at the moment. We need a proper West Yorkshire metro system, not just a couple of slow trams. That won't do it. It has to be ambitious, elevated underground sections, integrated with other forms of transport, tram trains, so every community is linked together. Public transport has to be the best first choice. The car has to become the last choice. We're nowhere near that. How can we afford it? Well, of course, the Yorkshire Party wants a full, proper devolution deal for Yorkshire. If we were levelled up with Scotland and London, we'd actually have an extra 14 billion a year. So it's very affordable if we get a devolution deal. Transport is, of course, just one aspect of our environmental manifesto. Want to ban
if you can finish off, Bob, are you all right to?
Okay, so well, a lot of the things will come to tonight. So banning fracking, going away from fossil fuels, and also building green technology colleges to build the workforce for the green industrial revolution. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, I know Matthew from the Social Democratic Party is having a bit of problems with his camera, but I understand that we
Can you hear me at all?
Oh, we can hear you now. Yeah, are you okay?
Yes, thank you. I don't know what's happening. I can't seem to get a full picture up, but I will do it by sound only, if that's okay with everybody. I'll try another computer. It's heaven knows what's going on. Anyway, right. Well, the Social Democratic Party, well, its origins go back to the early 1980s, merged with the Liberal Democrats, but it was reformed about 10 years ago. We fielded 20 candidates at the last election, and now it's 122. So we're sort of progressing forwards, and hopefully by maybe the early 2030s, we'll be a major party. Our position on environmental issues, well, as has been said, most of the parties agree on what of certain key actions that need to be done. I think where we differ is that we are pro-nuclear energy. We'd want to increase the number of, build a lot of new nuclear power stations, because that will aid our transition to an all-electric economy quicker. And we are also different from the other parties in that we're perfectly happy with new oil and gas mining, and new fracking for gas across Yorkshire and Lancashire, because we want to raise money. Going green costs money. It's no surprise that Norway is the greenest country in the world. Well, they can afford it from the billions they've made from mining oil and gas. So what we would wish to do is mine for new oil and gas and ring fence the tax revenues, so we can do everything the other parties are saying and a heck of a lot more as well, much, much more. So those are our two differences with the other parties. I mean, we really focus on I suppose, a technocratic approach to this rather than, well, I find with the climate issue, you've got a lot of people on one side who support this Just Stop Oil and all these, frankly, these pointless, irritating campaigns. And then if you don't agree with that, oh, you must be a climate change skeptic and all this. And I'm not a climate change skeptic, but neither do I appreciate the antics of all these campaigners, not because I don't care about climate change, it's precisely because I do. And they're not achieving anything. They're not helping. They're annoying people. They're putting everyone off. We want practical solutions that are practically, realistically, that acronym SMART, specific, measurable,
Matthew, you've come up to the end of your 2 minutes.
achievable, realistic, and time frame. You get that quicker with the SDP than any of the other parties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks ever so much, everyone. And thank you all for being kind of concise, keeping to the timing. It's always difficult. I know there's so much more that everybody would like to say, more than 2 minutes, but we need to get through as many questions as possible and give everybody the chance to speak. So what we're going to do now is move on to the top 3 questions that were submitted in advance. And just to remind you, they are on transport OVs. This is a Leeds Hustings after all, and it absolutely would not be a Leeds Hustings if transport wasn't our first issue. They're also on the economy and also on leadership. We've got some great questions going in the chat. Keep voting, because as I say, I'm going to take those in order of the voting. Just to let you know that the order that the speakers are going to go in is going to be the same for all the questions, and it's alphabetically, basically. So there's been no kind of picking names out of hats or whatever. It's as simple as alphabetically. So I'm going to take the first question, and this comes from Stephen Anderson and Nicola Ford. Now, I don't know whether Stephen or Nicola are there on the screen and want to come on and say hello. We will try and do that, by the way, when we get to the questions we take from the chat. But I'm not seeing anything there to say whether they are. So I'm just going to ask the question, if that's all right. So this comes, as I say, Stephen Anderson, Nicola Ford, and the questions are: firstly, if elected, how would you improve public transport in Leeds? And secondly, what position do you take on airport expansion? So first, let me go to Chris Foren for the Green Party.
You're muted, Chris. Yeah, you're muted, Chris.
It's a long time since we've said that, isn't it? But here we go. It's like time gone back, isn't it, for the pandemic? You're on mute.
No, I'm not anymore. Okay. So a big increase in money going into walking and cycling. First of all, it's clear that other countries can massively increase their cycling rates. Yes, I know that Holland is flat, but it's certainly windy. I've cycled there. Copenhagen has much worse weather than we do, but it's the biggest cycling city certainly in Europe, probably the world. It can be done. They have solved these problems for us, and as a result of that, they are healthier. The air is cleaner, it's quieter, and there are fewer collisions. So it's just a no-brainer, walking and cycling. As I said in my opening, we want local authorities to run the bus services. They should be taken out of private hands so that the local authority decides the routes, the frequency, and the fares. As far as I know, there's renewed talk about a tram system for Leeds. I have personally, and I know that some people in my party have reservations about that. It's incredibly expensive. It's because you have to dig up all the services underneath the road have to be moved. Sewers, water, gas, electricity, cable, the lot have to be moved so that you can put in a concrete track bed that won't ever be dug up. So Edinburgh found it was massively late in being dealt with and massively over budget. So I think many of us think that electric buses, walking and cycling is the way to go. As far as aviation is concerned, I was until very recently, until I was selected as candidate for Leeds Central and Headingley, I was chair of the Group for Action on Leeds Bradford Airport, and we have fought a doughty fight against the expansion, not just of Leeds Bradford Airport, but of aviation in general. And we think that whoever gets elected should accept the findings of the UK Climate Change Committee, which is there should be no net expansion of UK aviation.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that. Let me just follow up on the tram thing, though. What's your response to the fact that regularly people come up with that terrible accolade that Leeds has got, the largest city in Western Europe without a mass transit system? You're saying no mass transit system.
Well, let's think about it. Back in the 70s, we were going to be the motorway city of the 70s, and that, thank goodness, was knocked on the head. Labour Chancellor Alistair Darling killed off the Leeds tram system as it was originally proposed back in 2005, I think it was, and the planning inspectorate found grave defects in the proposed trolleybus system. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that we should think very, very carefully, because it's hugely expensive and it's going to be a long time coming. So if you were doing that as a way of reducing our emissions, then probably it wouldn't come on stream before it's really too late. You know, there are other more pressing and more profitable ways of reducing our emissions than moving to a tram. And I think an electric bus is a good way to go. But okay, that's not our policy. Those are just my thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Chris. Alex Sobel, can I come to you? The two questions: how are you going to improve transport in Leeds, having been an MP for the city for quite a long time, previously a councillor, and also your views on airport expansion?
I think in terms of airport expansion, I think probably everyone on this call knows my views and my history here. So Leeds Bradford Airport was in the old constituency. It's not in the constituency I'm running in now. But when the decision on the new terminal was made at the planning committee, I wrote the Secretary of State. I got the decision called in. It went to the planning inspector and was turned down. The Leeds Bradford National Airport blame me personally for the fact they can't have a new terminal building to facilitate the expansion of the airport, which doesn't make me popular with a lot of people, but sometimes you have to do unpopular things in politics. And my view always was that the airport should not expand before the 4 million or so passengers that it has now. In terms of transport, I think this is probably where me and Chris will depart. I am hugely supportive of mass transit for West Yorkshire. It's not a mass transit for Leeds. It's a mass transit system to connect some of the most disadvantaged and some of the hardest to reach by transport in West Yorkshire to employment opportunities in the centre of Bradford and the centre of Leeds. So we're talking about places like Batley, Dewsbury, Nottingley, Castleford, etc. And just in terms of the cost issue, if people might know Tom Forth's written a really interesting thread on Twitter, or X as it's now known, about Copenhagen. Copenhagen have just finished the first section of a new mass transit system for about 1.1 billion. And they're planning by 2030 to have a fully automated mass transit system. If we, and this is part of their party's plans nationally, change how we deliver infrastructure, we can do it in a similar cost to Europe, and that means we can get a mass transit system at a reasonable cost here in Leeds. But we also need active travel and a transformation of the existing infrastructure. So bus regulation will bring electric buses, because the mayor can say that the routes have to be serviced by electric buses. If you don't service them electric buses, or potentially hydrogen buses, then you won't get the routes. So bus regulation is of vital importance, but also we've seen Leeds City Council putting in much more cycling infrastructure and better walking infrastructure, and are planning even more. And it does cost money, but it should, in the end, once we get a fully connected network, mean that more people cycle and less cars on the road.
We've had promises from Labour before, though, haven't we, Alex, about the tram, whether it's
Yep.
West Yorkshire, whether it's Leeds, weren't delivered on them. What makes you say that we can actually trust you this time?
We didn't have a mayor. We didn't have a mayor. This is the devolved policy, and then you build the funds through that devolved policy. I'm talking to Andrew Adonis about it. Andrew Adonis turned the tram system down in 2005 that John Trickett started work on in 1995 when he was leader of the council, and he said it was his biggest mistake in politics, turning down our tram scheme. I've spoken to Lou Hay, who is the Shadow Transport Secretary. She's committed to it. There is nobody in the Labour Party that is not committed to mass transit in Leeds.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Let's go on to Chris Howley for the Liberal Democrats. Again, the two things: what are you going to do about transport in Leeds, and what's your view on airport expansion?
Okay, thank you. The key driver, I think, what we're all alluding to is we have got to find ways to get people out of cars, and public transport and active travel are obviously the ways to do that. I am concerned at the moment that what we've got in Leeds is a little bit piecemeal, and I don't think there's an overall strategy to it. And a couple of examples of that. There are areas in the place in particular in the area I represented where we had land set aside ready for a train station, and yet the council has done absolutely nothing about that. We need more park and rides, accompanied, as other people have said, with electric buses. I have been told that the park and ride in Sturton is available for fewer and fewer hours, particularly over the weekends, and has fewer buses. So some of the things other people have mentioned, such as giving local authorities more control over buses, again, is in our manifesto, and an important move forward. Whether or not a tram system is viable, I'd love a tram system for West Yorkshire, for Leeds, but the cost is there, and we do have to weigh up the cost of that compared to other potential solutions. With regards to the airport, the strongest argument I keep hearing for the airport is it's good for the economy. And yet, as far as I can see it, it actually takes people away from our economy. It doesn't tend to bring people in. And the moves that the airport wants to make in the expansion, we're going to increase automation. So I can't see it would have done much for employment either. My biggest concern, which is a battle still ongoing, is the issue of nighttime flights, which are terribly bad for people's physical and mental health, and is, for me, purely about making money for the Australian venture capitalists who own the airport. We all need to make a concerted effort to get away from air transport.
Okay, and just need to move you on
yeah.
that, just because of that, and just kind of to come back to you on something, because obviously I came back on the others. You talked about the park and rides there.
Yeah.
I was listening to PM this evening as I was coming home, and they were coming from Leeds North East constituency, and one of the people who was vox popped on that quite rightly said, you know, we do all right in this city for transport into the city centre, but we absolutely have got nothing. That's somebody else is saying they can't hear me. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll try and turn myself up. That we absolutely do not have transport that is cross city. You know, this is the third largest city in the country, and we have the 91 bus and one in South Leeds, and that's not it. Park and ride ain't going to sort that problem, because that's all about getting commuters in and out. What are you going to do about cross city transport?
Well, first of all, if we had park and ride all the way around the city and not just in the locations we've got it, yes, people can get then through the city. The easiest way to get people across the city in many instances is going to be taking them into the city and back out again, and we don't have that. We've actually had some bus services that used to run through the city now curtailing. It's a very easy solution to solve by having the bus services better coordinated, and by allowing people to buy tickets for their journey, not just for the bus. And we've had a good shift towards that in the last few years, but I think we can go a lot further. And again, giving local authorities more control over the buses means that we can provide the services that people need and not just the ones that are most profitable. So we can run things like a ring road bus service and some more of these cross-city bus services, by all means, yeah.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry to rush you all through. I know it's very frustrating. I know when you're watching it, because I know when I've been watching the televised debates, I've been frustrated at that. But we obviously want to get through as many questions. And just as I've been told, we've got 91 people listening live at the moment. So can I come to Matthew Leese for the Social Democratic Party? Same question: what are you going to do with transport in Leeds, and what's your views on airport expansion?
Sure. By the way, I am trying to log in with another device. I think the reason you can't see me is because I've got an old second-hand laptop. You try and do the right thing on that and it doesn't work. So you've got to constantly buy new technology all the time. Obviously, I'm representing Sheffield, but I'm sure that the issues are pretty similar. You know, my mind's taken back to when I was a student in Liverpool, and along the road there, there's a street called Smithdown Road. And we said at the time, and we still do, the 86 Garston Flyer is the greatest bus service in the world. And there's no timetable. There's always a bus there. In fact, I even remember in the 1997 general election, I watched it and I left someone's house around 4 a.m. and I waited 10 minutes for a bus in the middle of the night. And I think with buses, if you make them reliable enough, they don't even need a timetable, it creates its own demand. If people can trust that it's going to be there. So I think the SDP would subsidise buses, as the other parties have suggested. And also, we need to focus on buses around the city. I know my mother-in-law has to get a bus into Sheffield and then back out to a nursing home, which is actually not that far from her house, too far to walk. But it's a nonsense. I mean, you should be able to get a bus around the edge of a town. They've just got rid of all those. So as far as I'm concerned, you don't necessarily... Trams are good. They provide certainty, and they seem to create their own demand. But I think a good bus service... It needs to be there as a public good, even if it's loss making, because it is exactly that. It's a public good. So we absolutely support and endorse.
Can you just cover the airport issue? What your views are on airport expansion? Because I know that you don't support net zero.
I absolutely support net zero. I don't know where you get that from. As far as I'm
manifesto, it said it didn't support net zero.
Oh, sorry, I'm with you now. Yeah, we don't support the net zero specific law because I think it just leads to people making spurious court cases to stop all sorts of developments. I mean, there was a road development that was stopped. I think, well, if we're going to be driving electric cars in 20 years' time, what difference does it make? You know, we support getting to net zero, but just not these blunderbuss laws, which just seem to just they distract from what's actually needed, in my view. Now, with airport expansion, I mean, I don't know about the specific requirement of whether Leeds needs an expansion, but in general, I don't have a problem with airport expansion. When all this talk about Heathrow, it's got 2 runways. I mean, Paris Charles de Gaulle has 4 runways. Schiphol in Amsterdam has 6 runways, and yet somehow we've spent 30 years blocking 1 extra runway at Heathrow like that's going to save the world. It's not the answer. Unilateralist sort of Little England or environmentalism like that isn't going to save the world. The way to deal with emissions from aviation is to develop synthetic aviation fuel. And that is something that the SDP would invest in. It's not specifically in the manifesto, but I've talked it through with some people. Okay. That's something we would commit billions to doing.
Well, unfortunately, we run out of time. All the candidates, you may want to think about a challenge. I may well, but if we keep on that debate about actually how realistic that is. But I want to go to Bob for the Yorkshire Party, if that's okay. Bob, you've got those 2 questions. What are you going to do about transport in Leeds, and what's your view on airport expansion?
So first of all, I do support more research into biofuels. Even potential fuels could reclaim hydrocarbons from plastic. So there is a very green argument there to be had, and they're underrated at the moment. If we've got a choice, new flights, for example, new flights planned to Pakistan, they either go from Leeds or they go from Manchester. It makes more sense to go from Leeds. We get the jobs, and people then don't have to travel to Manchester. The terminal was going to be more eco-friendly, but they tied the application to night flights, which was a nonsense. Those two things are different applications. Time together was ridiculous. One thing I did help stop was the airport road. I led the statistical survey by Rawdon Parish Council, working with my fellow councillors, which proved traffic just wouldn't use that road very much at all. It's road to the Greenbelt really just to promote Greenbelt housing development. Managed to stop that, saved £100 million to the transport budget of West Yorkshire. It went towards the park and ride. It wasn't the best solution. I'd rather see a direct rail link to the airport to link to a future mass transit system. And that brings me onto the metro system. It mustn't just be slow trams. They're not good enough. It has to be a proper metro system, a bit like Newcastle has, perhaps, for the whole of West Yorkshire, not just for Leeds.
Are you talking about an underground system there?
It could be underground or elevated sections. Elevated might be easier to achieve in the situation, given the starting point which we're in. There was an underground which was started in Leeds, by the way, in the 70s. The only station that was ever built is now a public toilet, the perfect metaphor for our transport development. And as for the cost, I've said it before, mayors don't have enough power, they don't have enough budget. Tracy Brebman didn't cancel our leg at HS2, that was central government. She didn't want it cancelled, but her office doesn't have those powers. We have proper devolution settlement, extra 14 billion a year across Yorkshire. These things are then very affordable indeed. Of course, we want to see properly franchised, regulated buses that are there to actually serve the customer rather than serve themselves or just not turn up whenever the mood takes them. Then we also need to restore Yorkshire's lost railways which should never have been cut in the 60s. Disastrous decisions made back then. We also want to see smarter buses and a lot more buses in rural locations. A lot of villages all around Yorkshire are isolated from public transport completely. And of course, electric buses are the way forward there.
Bob, let me put this to you that I think a lot of people will be interested to know. I mean, in your manifesto, you specifically talk about having opposed the closure of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. You want it reopened, and you actually want to specifically increase air traffic at LBA. Talk to people on these hustings about that.
So lots of people travel to Manchester to fly or somewhere else to fly. I haven't taken a flight actually for 12 years. When I did, I had to get a bus to Manchester Airport. That doesn't really help. Now, you don't want to stop people doing things they want to do. You want them to do it in a greener way. If you're trying to say, oh, no flights, stop expanding flights, you're going to lose people. You're not going to get public support. You're not going to get votes. Things happen through democracy. So we need to invest in biofuels. They're underrated, and they really are the way forward here.
Okay,
that's what we need to be doing. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, we're going to slightly change subject again here. We're going to go on to the second question second most popular question that came in advance. This came from Ashley Arundel, so thank you very much, Ashley, for submitting this question. This is about economy. How will your party ensure that climate action policies also address social and economic inequalities in our community? And I think just for the sake of mixing it up a bit, I'm going to take you all in the opposite order, if that's all right. So, Bob, going to come to you first. How will your party...
Peg, would you mind just repeating the question? Because there's quite a lot in there for me to make a note of. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. How will your party ensure that climate action policies also address social and economic inequalities in our community? So, Bob, if I can come to you, and if I can ask you, definitely keep your answer within 2 minutes.
Well, firstly, not by destroying jobs at the airport. So you have to do it with the economy. If you destroy the economy in going green, you won't go green. It will never happen. But you don't have to destroy the economy. They go together. That's why I'm endorsed by the Climate Party, with that shared belief. Think about the cost of living crisis. Energy prices are the absolute heart of that. All new buildings which have proper solar power as well as proper world-class insulation, and we need to have subsidies restored and indeed improved for existing buildings. We also need a workforce to do this. My employer wanted to get solar panels at the height of the energy crisis. They had to wait, it was something like 10 months, and they haven't done it since. The opportunity, when the motivation was there, the opportunity was missed. There wasn't the workforce, there wasn't the manufacturing base. Specialist green technology colleges can build that workforce. And we're talking about, kids learning thermodynamics, learning engineering, mathematics in a very practical scenario. So it's going to set them up for a job for life. If this country can lead the green digital revolution, that's great for our economy. It's great for social inequality. Also, devolution in itself is great for that, of course. Our schools, particularly in Yorkshire, are underfunded. Our education is seriously suffering. A lot of the inequalities you see stem from a lack of funding for education anti-support for SEND pupils, which is something as a teacher, I'm very passionate about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Bob, let me just ask you this then. If you're talking about growing the economy, how does that sit within addressing climate and environmental needs? I mean, how realistic is it that this technology is not actually is actually going to be sustainable?
Well, what do you mean? We know solar power works. We know offshore wind power is incredibly effective. We know insulation from our common sense is very effective. We know the industries are tomorrow. There's already a race, an international race, to lead the green industrial revolution. And it might surprise people that a country that isn't particularly green, China, is actually winning that race by controlling natural resources and manufacturing bases. We're losing it. So our future prosperity depends on going green. And this is the argument we need to take to people. We want people to vote for us. They've got to believe their life will be better in the short term and the long term. Okay. It will be if we go green. The science is, I'm a man of science and engineering. The science is there.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that, Bob. Let me come now to you, Matthew, for the Social Democratic Party. The same question. How are you going to ensure that climate action policies also address social and economic inequalities in the community?
Well, the SDP is an economically left-wing party, so that's core to our manifesto generally. We believe in using the freedom. Well, we would go further with Brexit, so we get proper use of an industrial policy where we can create jobs in our own country without violating EU competition rules. We want to create lots of manufacturing jobs. Good jobs is surely the best way to reduce inequality. Plus our whole energy policy and our whole energy agenda is about stable, secure energy that is affordable. And a lot of the green policies, I'm concerned that, for example, installation of smart meters across the board, you know, if the wind isn't blowing on a cold winter's night, they're going to have to price electricity so high that poorer people are going to have to sit in the dark and freeze. And you know, all the language around smart meters worries me that we're just going to do that to people. And it's going to inevitably be the case, I feel. So it's a difficult one to answer, that how would climate action, it's across our manifesto. We're not a socialist party, we're a capitalist party, but a social democratic party. Redistribution of wealth, good jobs, always looking out for the most vulnerable is core to our manifesto. So I think, yeah, energy prices, food security, it's all part of it, all part of the mix.
So how does that fit, though, within being in a world which has just got finite natural resources and can only take a certain amount more pollutants and carbon going into the atmosphere? How do your economic policies sit with that?
Well, I agree with what Bob Buxton of the Yorkshire Party said. Technology is, in my view, the answer. We can get electricity carbon-free in huge levels, especially with the help of nuclear, but I'm all in favour of renewables as well. Moving to an all-electric economy will mean we can be zero carbon. That's the aim. That's what we want to do. And as for it's a sort of fashionable view that's come of recent times, that economic growth is necessarily always bad for the environment. And I don't agree. Richer countries are generally cleaner because they can afford to put better health and safety, and they can afford to put environmental protections in. If you're struggling to put food on the table, you know, you can't. And so, you know, you look at Africa, the population might triple over the next 60 or 70 years. Should we deny them the opportunity for economic expansion? I believe 10 billion people can live to an American standard of living, and with the right laws, the right regulation, can do so in harmony with the environment. I'm not a believer in this degrowth, this anti-growth. I think it's actually ultimately counterproductive. And economic growth is what it is to be human. It's about being more efficient than we were yesterday. So if you've ever done something at work where you think, hang on a minute, we could make this a bit better, you know, no, we're pro-growth, but pro-environment at the same time.
I'm going to have to move it on. Thanks very much for that. Apologies. I know it's a short amount of time and there's a lot more people want to talk about, but as I say, I've been asked to get through as many questions. So can I come now to Chris Howley for the Liberal Democrats? Same question.
Thank you. I think there's a great misleading argument put to us by the oil companies that we need to be investing in oil for for the economy, because that's where wealth comes from. And it's completely wrong, quite frankly. I've mentioned it already at Hustings this week. If you want a really fantastic example of a not very wealthy country removing itself from fossil fuel and moving towards renewables and getting a massive benefit to its economy and a more equal society, the case study is Uruguay, and you can find it on the web by doing an internet search, and the Uruguayan move to renewable energy. The most expensive form of electricity today is from nuclear. So that should be forget what you believe in nuclear or not, that for me should be the nail in the nuclear coffin. The cheapest form of electricity today is wind, substantially. It creates other problems, infrastructure, storage, but that's where we should be heading. So I believe that a push towards renewables actually helps reduce inequalities. It puts into society. Alongside that, we do need direct intervention. I think it's criminal that over the past few years, the only people who've been able to really afford electric vehicles are the people with big company car accounts, and have often been misusing those. And I read very sadly that plug-in hybrids have an awful record, because a lot of drivers of them are getting them through their company and not bothering to use them properly. The Liberal Democrat manifesto has lots in it on supporting the more vulnerables in society, insulating homes, making air source heat pumps affordable, and committing community benefit funds from local renewable energy. So I don't think at all for a minute that managing climate change and managing inequality in society are incompatible. You just have to be strategic and clever and intelligent about it, and it can be achieved.
I mean, you talked there about electric vehicles, and you expressed your concern about them, but there is also another concern happened today with, one car company saying it might have to pull out of the UK. Would you be subsidising electric vehicle firms to stay in the UK?
I don't think that is one just to answer now. There's a whole huge arena around this. I mean, ultimately, we need to respect the fact that some people do need and are dependent on cars, but actually we need to get as many people out of cars as possible. So I think putting an end to the internal combustion engine is more important than anything else. But we should be, as a country, investing more in battery power and supporting what is a very necessary industry. So yes, I would say, but to a degree, and not to the expense of other renewable investment, which will serve our economy and our society and our climate better.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that. Alex Sobel, question qualities in the community.
Thank you. I think that the Climate and Nature Bill that I introduced in the last Parliament does give part of the answer to this. It was supported by 5 of the parties in that Parliament. If I'm re-elected, I intend to reintroduce it. It would create a whole of government approach so that we both protect nature and ensure we have an integrated response to both the natural world and tackling climate change. It would create an overarching strategy, and we'd also have a climate and nature assembly, which would give a whole range of cross-section society a say in the strategy. We would also take into account issues like mental health and social inequality, which the question was about. And then that would try and create the framework and hopefully departisanize this debate, because the assembly would be a cross-societal assembly, citizens' assembly, which would give it that confidence. In terms of Labour's manifesto, we've got this mission-based approach, and one of our missions is by 2030 that our entire power system is net zero. So we would no longer have gas-fired power stations. We'd no longer be burning biomass in Yorkshire, and that we would ensure that all of that happens. And we're going to pay for that by having a new, larger windfall tax on the oil and gas industry, by creating Great British Energy a public company. I know some people here that might sound like socialism, but that's usually popular in society. We'd have a public company generating energy, and Chris said the cheapest form of energy generation is wind, which is right, but onshore wind is cheaper than offshore wind. We've effectively had no new onshore wind for many years. We bring back onshore wind. We'd also ban fracking and coal mining and new oil and gas licenses.
Thanks, Alex. Let me just ask you a question about that, though, because obviously Great British Energy is a big part of the Labour Party manifesto, but it is going to be a PFI arrangement, isn't it? And I looked up the figures currently that we're paying out for PFI from the previous Labour government, and this is according to IPPR. £1 in every 6 of the NHS now is going on PFI repayments. We've still got 55 billion to pay. They called it toxic. So how are you feeling about that?
I mean, it would be completely different. It would be that's the private finance to pay for public buildings, and this is about the public investments going in to joint ventures to generate energy. The public sector, even a GB Energy, build wind farms, solar farms, and other forms of renewables, floating, wave, etc., new forms of renewables, hydrogen storage, without the involvement of the private sector. If somebody else says they can, I'd like to see their party deliver it. But in this next Parliament, there isn't the capacity for a brand new public company to immediately do that. But the Wealth Fund. So I think Matthew talked about the Norwegians. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which is going to be funded through the windfall tax. Once that sovereign wealth fund builds up over time, then we'll be able to do much more with it in terms of not but trans housing right across the piece. But you start.
You keep cutting out a little bit, I'm afraid to say. I know you were saying that your Wi-Fi connection isn't the great. I mean, there's quite a few questions to you in the chat, so you might want to answer some of those into the chat if that's all right as well. But thanks very much for that. Let me go to Chris Foren for the Green Party. Go on, Chris.
Well, the question as put was, how can climate action address social and economic problems? I think it can do so by itself, and it can also do so hand in hand with other policies. And I'd like to mention here the Green Party's proposal for a wealth tax. So if you have £10 million or more, you pay 1% a year to the Exchequer. And if I were a millionaire, and I'm certainly not, would I begrudge that? No, I wouldn't. And if you're lucky enough to own assets worth more than £1 billion, you pay 2% a year. Not a lot of money, they won't miss it, but it does bring in a huge quantity of money to the Exchequer. The estimates vary depending on assumptions you make about how many people fall into that category, but certainly tens of billions of pounds every year. But how does climate action address social and economic difficulties? Well, frequent flyer levy, which we advocate. 70% of flights are taken by something like 10% of the richest people who've got villas abroad and so on. There's nothing wrong with people taking one flight a year, probably. But some people are taking 6, 7 or 8 flights a year, and the frequent flyer levy would, first of all, bring in some money and to the Exchequer, but secondly, perhaps encourage those people, instead of flying, to go to Europe by train, which I've just done, and it was wonderful. On insulation, insulation lowers bills for deprived people because they pay less in terms of their income and still keep warm. I agree with Chris Howley that nuclear power, certainly Hinkley C is looking to be the most expensive possible way of creating electricity, generating electricity, and we still haven't solved any of the questions about how you deal with nuclear waste, and we haven't solved the question about safety of nuclear. If a nuclear power plant goes up, the toxic radioactive waste could carry on infecting this planet for 100,000 years. We haven't solved that.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to let you all know, I'm going to go in the same order that I just did for the next question, but let me just come back on that to you, Chris, because the first thing you talked about there was about the new taxes that you'd bring in, and obviously what you've just said is reliant on raising the money, but the IFS has really questioned those figures that the Green Party has come out with about the amount of money that can be raised from these new taxes. They're very, very dubious about it. Have you got your sums right?
I don't know. I'll be absolutely frank. I think nobody knows, and I should say that the IFS has been critical of all the parties' figures. So let's not just single out the Green Party. It was particularly critical of Labour, and it said about their proposals for funding services as being tiny, bordering on trivial. So yes, the IFS has been critical of us. It's been critical of everyone. I see this as being about direction of travel. We may have the sums wrong, in which case we'll have to rethink, or we'll have to borrow a bit more. But I would like the other candidates to put their hands on their hearts and say they've got their sums right, because I don't think they can do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I'm not going to do any follow-ups on the next question, just because we're kind of going a bit behind time, but we're going to go in the same order we've just done that. So starting with Bob, this is the next question. It's about leadership, okay? And if everyone could be quite succinct in answering it. And somebody may well put it in the chat as well for us. Extreme weather events linked to climate change are getting worse each year. Will your party put climate and biodiversity at the heart of all its decisions? And why should we trust you not to change policies once elected? So, Bob, Yorkshire Party, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of our sums, by the way, I put my hand on my heart there. The figures I got there were Treasury figures for 2023, extra 14 billion a year for Yorkshire if we get a proper devolution settlement. Environment is very much at the heart of our policies. You can, of course, look at the website. It's all there in the manifesto. It's not just greener transport. I talked a lot about that today. It is greener homes too, of course, because you get more pollution actually from domestic use, and of course business use as well. How can you trust politicians to keep their word? Well, I'm afraid there isn't really an answer there, is there? I can put my hand out and say I intend to have the power, everything that I promised to do. We have been failed by Westminster multiple times, not just by the Tories, by the Tory Liberal coalition, by the Labour government before that. And what I'm saying in terms of devolution, you've then got a sort of competition, more competition within the country, a healthy competition with different regions with real power competing to be the greenest, leading innovations. We're a very innovative country indeed. But in terms of climate change, the innovation has been stifled. Environmentalism isn't as popular as it was perhaps just a few years ago. Tories deserted pledges, SNP deserted pledges. Even Labour's been reeling in a bit. All I can say is that, okay, is that my out time?
Yeah, we've got just a little bit more, but a few seconds if you want to finish off.
Sure, well, give Yorkshire the chance to lead with devolution.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for that. Matthew, again, if you could keep to your time, why should we trust you not to change policies? Will you put climate and biodiversity at the heart of your decisions?
Well, in the future, when I hope the SDP does get elected, we won't change our position because it's what we believe in. We're not doing this for just to get paid. We're doing it because it's something we believe in, and I care about the planet a great deal. In terms of putting climate and diversity at the heart of all its decisions, well, yes, frankly. I mean, we have a policy to get our climate emissions down, to lead the rest of the world on that. And we have a range of policies to improve biodiversity in the countryside, working with farmers. The way that we lead on this, I think, is to be the world leader in that technology. I've mentioned some things in the past earlier on, like synthetic aviation fuel. I mean, why don't we have like why can't we commission the invention of things like a combined heat pump and gas boiler? If everyone in the country that has a gas boiler had one of them, it would get gas emissions from households down by 2/3. We need an electric car charging point that can fit into the curb, because how are people going to charge their cars if they don't have a driveway, which is most people? These things just haven't been thought through. But if we invent this technology, we can export it around the world and be a world leader. And that's what the SDP wants to do. We won't be a world leader by just shutting down mining and industrial operations. We need to lead on that technology. So that's the thrust of where we're at. We believe we can lead and we should lead.
Okay, thank you. Brilliant. Thanks very much. Yeah, very quickly, why should we trust you? You just a few seconds.
Oh no, I wanted to, if I have a chance for something else, I'd like to come back on a point earlier, but we'll do that later if we have a chance.
If we get a chance, yeah. Or you can always put it in the chat. So thanks
Yeah.
very much for that. Chris Howley?
Thank you. Yeah, again, if you look at our manifesto and some of the comments I've made already, climate change is at the heart of our manifesto. We are, as a party, committed to getting to net zero and to meeting the UK's commitments on the Paris Agreement. Can you ever trust a politician? Yeah. On a personal level, I would say that the feedback I've had as a politician has been very positive, and people have said to me the one thing we always liked about you as our councillor was you always did what you said you were going to do. I don't want to change this into a different discussion, and I don't think I'll be allowed to, but ultimately this is at the heart of the political system that we've got, with too many politicians with safe seats and aren't accountable, and we need all politicians to actually be much more vulnerable in their work, and much more accountable. And I think that is the thing that will, in the long term, achieve that.
Right, thank you. Thanks very much. Let me go now to Alex Sobel.
Thank you. I was the Shadow Nature Minister for 2 years, and I worked very closely with Miliband and his team. And I've got real trust in them and the work they've done to build Labour's Green Prosperity Plan. The last time Labour in government, Ed held the same position, and in 2007, the UK passed the world's first Climate Change Act. And the work that was done in his 3 years in that position, without it, we would still have mass coal-fire power stations in the country. It'd make our whole job of decarbonisation much harder. The solar feed-in tariffs were introduced by Ed Miliband. The start of work on EV infrastructure was started under Ed Miliband. There's a whole range of things that in quite a short period of time, he managed in a much more difficult operating environment where climate change didn't have the sort of level of support it has now, climate policies. And the other thing is that we're going the Green Prosperity Plan is part of a broader green industrial strategy. We've looked at what Joe Biden's done in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, which isn't perfect, that has created quite a lot of new green jobs and has helped accelerate decarbonisation in the US against quite a difficult, in some places, political environment in that country, which I'm sure I know everybody knows what I'm talking about. And one of the things I haven't spoken about that we said we're going to do is a carbon border adjustment mechanism. And that means it will give space for industry to decarbonise and protect them against high carbon goods, for instance, steel made using coal in other countries, by taxing them to adjust the carbon between UK-made products, those products. It will encourage decarbonisation here and ensure there isn't undercutting from low cost, high carbon products coming from other countries. And I think that's really important. It's the role of the state to ensure that we can work this through, and that's sort of heart of Labour's thinking.
Thanks very much, Alex. And then up to Chris for the Greens.
Yeah, I feel this question has been mistitled by saying it's about leadership. It seems to be more about integrity. And I believe quite frankly, the Green Party as a party has integrity. I'll give you one clear, concrete example of that. A few years ago, we were given quite a substantial donation by a well-known clothes designer. I won't name that person. We then discovered that before being given to us, it had been languishing in a tax haven for some years. And when we learned about that, we gave it all back. And that's a hard thing to do for a party that doesn't get donations from big business and doesn't get money from trades unions. We're essentially always having to look at our bank balance. And so it was a difficult thing to do, but we nevertheless did it. So I think if the question is about integrity, then I think that's a box we can check. I'd also like to echo something I just read in the chat from Ellen Rowbottom, whom I know reasonably well, saying that it shouldn't be, we shouldn't want to be world leaders all the time. And I really try not to be tribal about any policies. The Labour's Green Deal, I believe, had its genesis in the Green New Deal, which we started in 2010. I don't care who does this stuff as long as it gets done. But I'm working as hard as I can. Let's be realistic. Alex is going to win this election. I'm quite confident about that. I haven't put any money on it. But we need to have Green Party voters across the country to give any MPs that we do get some really heavy moral authority, so that when they stand up in the House of Commons advocating for these things, they can say, look, 1.5 million, 2 million people voted for this. And you need to take account of the people who want to change this world and to stop it diving into the abyss.
And thanks very much, Chris. And just to say, you've won joke of the evening, according to Rob Walker on the chat there, for your joke about the gambling. So thanks very much for that. We're going to move on to the questions that are there, and I don't know if John Cockburn is able to come on screen, wants to come on screen to ask the question which has got the most thumbs up at the moment. And just to say on this, I'm going to go in the order that I can see you on my screen, just to shake it up a little bit. So John, do you want to ask your question? And just very, very quickly give us a tiny bit of your view. You're on mute though. Okay. So I think I'm not sure that John's there to ask the question. So I will ask it on behalf of John. If someone again could paste it into the chat so that all the panelists can see it, that would be great. So this is the question. Do the candidates believe our capitalist system, which requires never-ending economic growth and the continual expansion of financial debt, is compatible with the long-term survival of humans on Earth? And thank you very much, Sarah Mumford and Simon Dixon have put it in the chat. So going down my list of people who's there, Chris Howley, you're on the top on my little pictures that I've got. Can I come to you first? Is the capitalist system compatible with the long-term survival of humans on Earth?
We've seen the evidence from the last government for the last few years. Unfettered capitalism is hugely damaging and dangerous. Social liberalism is all about finding the right path through to best support the people, the world, balancing the motivation of business and giving people freedom and liberty to make their own decisions, and therefore is in a very strong position to help on the climate agenda. There's one of the point that just escaped me momentarily. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, I go back on this to one of our previous leaders who, when asked on issues of economy, said, don't we have to manage the economy? And his response was, yes, but we need to remember who we're managing the economy before. And I think the same argument actually holds true here. We need successful businesses. We need businesses that support people and employees, and we need very firm regulation and controls to move us forward on the environmental agenda.
Great, thank you. And if John, I don't know if John is still there and wants to kind of come back after the questions, please do. Or if you want to put something in the chat, I can make sure I read that out to everybody, John, if you want to kind of come back on what everyone says. So Chris Foren, you're next on my my little screen that I've got here. Is it compatible with the long-term survival of humans on Earth?
No, it is not. Emphatically. Here's an example. I learned recently one of the rationales for our proposal to renationalise the water companies. Privatisation has loaded water companies in this country with around £64 billion of debt. At the same time, they gave away £78 billion in dividends. And so what they are doing is taking our money, because it's a natural monopoly. We all need to have water. So they take our money in the form of water bills, give it away to their shareholders, and fail to build any proper infrastructure, any proper sewage disposal units. And so we end up with all our rivers and beaches, all of them are contaminated. And that seems to me to be completely emblematic of modern capitalism. And it's been going on since Margaret Thatcher came to power in 1979, the selling off of public assets, giving them at cut price rates to their friends in the banks and finance industry, and impoverishing the rest of us. That's why we favour renationalisation of water. That's why we favour renationalisation of rail, so that these things can be run in the public interest for and by the public. Okay. Of course, we're not communists. I certainly I think that for small and medium-sized enterprises should be in private hands. They should be properly regulated. But as I said at Hustings the other day, it mustn't be light touch regulation. And every time the Tories talk about red tape, they mean regulation that saves lives. Let's be clear about that. If the people putting together Grenfell Towers had been properly regulated and the regulations had been properly policed, that fire would not have happened and those people wouldn't have died.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris. Bob, Yorkshire Party, can I come to you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm back. And huge thanks to Chris for stealing my answer. So water companies, why is a failing company paying big fat bonuses, paying dividends, which it can only afford because it's being bailed out by the taxpayer? Absolutely ridiculous, absolutely intolerable. They're breaking pollution limits, fine them. Use that money. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And I understand why Chris, of course, has mentioned, Thatcher mentioned privatisation. I don't think even Thatcher would use taxpayer money to bail out a company failing this badly. Because actually capitalism means failure should be punished, not rewarded. It isn't. What's happened to the water companies isn't capitalism either, actually. It's just complete nonsense. You can call it cronyism, certainly. It is complete nonsense.
So is it compatible with the long-term survival of humans on Earth? That's the question.
Well, clearly, in terms of the water companies, no, it isn't. What we got there is a disastrous, bizarre mishmash model. I wouldn't call it capitalism or anything. It's just its own thing, which is a complete disaster. Now, it doesn't mean we have to be anti-business to go green. I'm being consistent tonight. We use green technology. It improves the economy, so we can afford to do more of it. Whatever you want to do in life, you have to be able to afford to do it. We haven't got unfettered capitalism in this country. Of course, we have a National Health Service. Now, it needs better support than it's had over the last few years over the Tories, certainly. They're trying to sort of wean us off it. More and more companies are providing private healthcare for that reason, so it needs more support. But we are quite a compassionate nation in many ways. So I wouldn't call us unfettered capitalism in this country. If you're looking at a world view, then I agree with what you're saying. More America, more this what we're seeing from China. So no, capitalism, unfettered, unregulated, is not compatible with what we need to be doing. Certainly not. And it does worry me that China is becoming, or perhaps already become, the most powerful nation on Earth. They're winning the green technology revolution because they control natural resources, but they're not going green themselves with it. that does worry me. We've got to show that green technology has massive economic advantages. We're a nation of inventors. So I want to see Yorkshire being a chance to lead the innovation. We must win the economic argument to save the planet.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Alex Sobel, is the capitalist system compatible with long-term survival of humans on Earth?
I think we're all riffing on the same theme, because I was going to talk about the water sheet, because I was responsible for water as Shadow Nature Minister for 2 years, and I think the point I didn't quite hear it before, I might have missed it, is that the water companies could mark their own homework. So in rivers and in the sea, the monitoring was done by the water companies. And then the regulation was effectively self-regulation. The Environment Agency, which is meant to be the regulatory body and is a weak regulator, and I had many meetings, unfortunately, with the chief executive of the Environment Agency, didn't take sufficient action against the water companies, just take tokenistic action. I think there's two things here. One is regulation, having heavy regulation, unlimited fines, which is laid policy, but also the rule of law. The rule of law is really important. We see lots of countries, including non-capitalist countries, where there's a failure of the rule of law. If we have a strong rule of law and strong regulation, then we can ensure that things are done properly. I'm not sure. I don't take the framing of the question, because capitalism is like one of those. It can mean anything. We're talking about laissez-faire capitalism. Yeah, fine. We're talking about anarcho-capitalism, state capitalism, welfare capitalism. It's not a simple thing. I don't really want to get into politics debate here. You know, it's not. We're not at university, are we? We're not doing our degrees.
But what about the part of that question, which is the never-ending economic growth? Is that compatible with long-term survival?
For us to transform society to a net zero society is going to involve economic growth. Because if you take every gas boiler in this country and turn it into a district heating power system through shared ground source or other forms of zero heating, I'm telling you that will create economic growth. So by not doing things, you can have not growth, but by doing things, you have growth. It's how you make that change that's important. And the most important thing is that we ensure that we are running towards that zero emission society.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. And then Matthew, if I can come to you very quickly, again, that same question.
Well, first of all, the SDP would renationalise water companies and all the natural monopolies. That's been our policy for 10 years. The problem with this is that I don't quite know what people mean when they say they're anti-capitalist. I think I was interested that Chris from the Green Party said that he's not not sort of anti-capitalist. Because that surprised me, because I thought that, you know, they often describe themselves as not yourself specifically, but people describe themselves as democratic socialists. What does it actually mean? So I think what people mean is unfettered capitalism, unrestrained capitalism. And as a social democratic party, we are against that. We're in favour of regulated capitalism. I think that we all agree on that on this this panel. But in terms of economic growth, again, I don't accept this viewpoint that's been going on and on. I've read books. I've read a book called Less is More. It's a bestseller. I didn't agree with it. You know, that economic growth always means more resource consumption. We're actually using fewer resources per person than 30 years ago because of recycling. We recycled nothing 40 years ago. Now we recycle a great deal. In fact, I believe deforestation globally is now in reverse, apart from Brazil, sadly, but across the world as a whole, you think not? Well, okay, fair enough. I'll take that back. But right, well, I read that somewhere. But one of the reasons given was that people were cutting down fewer trees because they're using other resources. And that's because of economic growth. So I just don't accept the premise. Unfettered capitalism is bad, but regulated capitalism is good. And I don't accept that economic growth has a limit because it's about human ingenuity. I created economic growth just yesterday when I devised a new spreadsheet that quickened the process. 1 million changes like that across the economy every year is what creates economic growth. I think people perhaps don't understand the crux of what economic growth is. And it's not about resource consumption. That's a consequence of it if you let it be. But that's not the crux of what it is. So I don't accept the premise. So
just need to move you on that.
yep,
Thank
I'm
you.
done.
John Cockburn, are you there? And would you like to just briefly kind of come back on any of the answers on that? No, I'm not sure that John's there. Okay. What we're going to do is I'm going to take the next question, but if it's all right, can I ask everyone to give almost like 1 or 2 word answers to this next one? Because it should be quite straightforward. And I'm going to start off with you, Alex, because I think I know your answer to this one. This is Jenny's question, and Jenny gave a bit of an introduction to the question, but the question itself is quite simple. She says, studies have shown the UK is amongst the most nature depleted group of nations on earth. That's why this weekend, Jenny marched along with 80,000 people, 350 nature climate NGOs from across the UK, demanding we restore nature now. So will you pledge to back the science-led climate and nature bill upon its reintroduction to Parliament and commit to reserve lost by 2030? And I'm assuming, Alex, you can do this one in 1 word.
We already have. I introduced it. But I just want to say very quickly, that quote about nature depletion is Zach Goldsmith, who was the Conservative minister. So it's the Conservative government's own quote, that quote about nature depletion. And actually, I was asked to speak on that march, and it was originally organised by Chris Packham, but obviously we're having elections, so I couldn't do that.
Brilliant. Bob, very quick answer. If you were in Parliament, will you support its reintroduction and commit to halt and reserve nature loss by 2030?
Yes, absolutely. We've committed to these things for years. And if I may say very quickly, my co-leader, Simon Bilcliffe, has rewilded 166 acres in Scotland. So it's something we're very committed to. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Foren?
Yeah, before I answer the question, I want to give Alex Sobel a hearty congratulations for promoting the Climate and Nature Bill along with Caroline Lucas and others. What a shame he isn't the Labour Party leader. Because I think that the party will be a very different Labour Party if Alex was in charge of it.
I think you've killed any chance now of me being the Labour Party leader, Chris, by saying that.
Sorry.
Are you ruling yourself out, Alex? Very quickly, just got to follow you. Are you ruling yourself out? Are you there?
There is no vacancy, I think, is the answer.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for that.
Yeah. 1 word answer, yes, we would certainly commit to that. That's what we do.
Okay, brilliant. Chris Howley?
I'm not going to commit to a bill that I haven't read, although if it is what I think it is, I'm sure it would have my support. Our manifesto has a lot on this issue of nature recovery, planting trees, doubling nature and woodland by 2050. I am pretty and create wild belts across the country. I'm sure we're singing the same song here. I'm sure we're all on the same page.
And Matthew, what about you?
As with net zero, I'd have to look at the detail of it first. I did have a skip read of this, and I probably wouldn't back the law, even though I back the results, because I don't think sweeping laws necessarily get the best results. It should be more focused and targeted. So I agree with the aims, but I wouldn't necessarily back the law if I didn't think it would achieve what it says, what it wants to do. So it depends on that one. Though I agree with the outcome, you know.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question that came in. And Reinhard Huss, if you want to kind of come on as well and give a response afterwards, after we've had some answers. This is about the basic income. Reinhard asks, do candidates support basic income pilots in Leeds as an approach to creating a caring society for people and planet and provide a vital safety floor during crises such as weather extremes due to climate change? So again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close my eyes and see who comes up first on my screen as a way of kind of mixing it up a bit. And actually, Bob, you came into my vision first there. So if I can come to you.
Yes, we support UBI trials. We have done now for a couple of years. When I was so leader, we agreed to support pilots for it. If you have bluntly a bit of a safety net, you can actually encourage people to take more risks and to innovate more. So it might sound like it's really, really left wing. Not necessarily. You might actually find these real innovation, economic growth, and certainly us leading the way with the green agenda.
Okay, thank you. Chris Howley?
Sorry, just struggling to unmute there. Yeah, Liberal Democrats introduced a white paper to Leeds City Council on universal basic income. It's adventurous, it's creative, it's challenging, it will frighten a lot of people, but I think it's the kind of push that we need to try and change the way our society works.
Thank you. Chris Foren.
Yes, the Green Party has had introduction of a universal basic income in a number of its recent manifestos. It's certainly something that we think is the way ahead. We've got to get people out of the grinding poverty they're in now. Something like 3 million people are going to food banks now. That is unacceptable, and it used not to be the case. In 2008, the number of food bank recipients was around 25,000. We need to have a huge change in the way that we distribute wealth in this country. And how is it that we used to be able to afford NHS dentistry for everyone who wanted it? Now we don't, and people are pulling their own teeth out, or they're going through a lot of pain and they're just overdosing on painkillers. That was something we used to take for granted, and now it's something that seems to have disappeared. School dinners are the same. You know, when I went to school, we used to have a proper, good, nutritious, balanced food served up by dinner ladies. And now we have a system where a head teacher from Southampton, I think it was, sent a photo of their children's lunch, which was a manky baked potato on a plastic tray. So why is it that we used to be able to afford decent standards for people, and now we're told we can't?
Okay, thank you very much. Matthew, on this question, will you support basic income pilot in Leeds?
I think sorry to repeat myself, the devil's in the detail. I agree with it in principle, but I'd need to know what it was covering, because I was thinking about this once, and it would pay the equivalent of the minimum wage to everybody. Would it include housing costs? I mean, I don't want to sort of get answers back now, but if it did, would not that be subject to some kind of restriction on who it could be given to? I just think if it can be made to work, I'm in favour of it. I just think that the housing issue for me, because would that mean everybody gets a free house kind of thing? Where does that all fit in? What if there's a lot of detail to be worked out in it, but in principle, I agree with it. I'm finding myself agreeing with the Green Party a lot on all their sort of social issues about, school dinners, that's in our manifesto, and all the rest. There's a lot. We are a left-wing party and care greatly about vulnerable people. So if the basic income tool, I think it's a good idea, but I don't think it's necessarily a panacea. But it's nevertheless, I think it's something that should be looked into and seen how it works out, because it will make things less bureaucratic as well. So if everyone just gets something there, then it makes everything easier. So yes, I think so, but it depends on the detail, that's all.
Alex, if you're re-elected, will you support this? Would you push your colleagues on the council to do this?
So, well, the council doesn't have the powers to do it. Let's just be really clear. So let's just go to sort of back a step to that. In March 2020, I wrote a piece at the beginning of the pandemic advocating for UBI as an alternative to furlough. And I feel very justified in doing that, because if you just look at self-employed, at freelancers, on people platform workers as they're called, etc., they were absolutely done in by the furlough arrangements and the self-employment arrangements the government did. If we'd had UBI, it would have been much better. And so I think there is definitely an argument in specific circumstances that I think there's a debate to be had about universal basic income and universal basic services. We have one major universal basic service in the UK, which is the National Health Service. Care, social care. I don't think UBI will solve social care. If we have a national care service with universal basic standard social care for those that need it, I think that would be a much better way forward in national care service in the Labour manifesto. Childcare, food, there are a number of things. My one issue, we talked about growth before. UBI will be a driver of growth, because what it'll be is people get money, and where do people spend money? In the private sector. So that means money goes from the public to the private. And then so it will generate growth. If you have your basic services delivered by the public sector, then that money is spent by the public sector and remains in the public sector. And I think it's a really good debate to have. And I think we should explore that debate rather than having like sort of more sort of glib answers. But having pilots isn't something.
Oh, we just lost you a little bit at the end there, but I think that we got the sense of what you were saying there as well. I was nodding along when you said that because I was one of those people, those self-employed people through the furlough who lost all my work right at the start of the pandemic and was self-employed, unfortunately. Anyway, we've got time just for one last question. We've actually only got about 7 or 8 minutes left for the debate. So, and unfortunately, it's a massive, massive question. So I kind of feel like, oh, what we're going to do about the end of the world? You've got 1 minute to answer it, unfortunately. But I'm going to go with the Reverend John Swales question. I'm sorry, Reinhard, if you're there. Do you want to just kind of give us a kind of thumbs up or something if your camera's there to just really quickly tell
Yes,
us?
can you hear me?
Yeah, just really, really quickly what you
Yeah,
thought.
I want to thank the candidates. I'm very happy with most of the responses. I agree that it promotes creativity and innovation. A lot depends on the financing of, Alex Sobel said, it's moving money from the public to the private sector. It doesn't have to be. If the financing is through wealth taxes and hyper consumption taxes, then it will actually move money from the private to the private sector for essential consumption rather than sort of luxury consumption. So I think it can be done. Thank you.
No, brilliant. Thank you very much. The question that's at the top of the list now is one from the Reverend John Swales. And again, John, if you just be there if you want to kind of come back, but you know, this I kind of hesitate really to ask this and say, can you all answer this really quickly? Because this is a kind of end of the world doomsday nightmare scenario. You know, so which is really hard to then say a very quick question, but I think it's a very pertinent one here. So John has said we're on a trajectory for societal collapse, 2.7 degrees above industrial temperatures by the end of the century, a world of mass migration and mass starvation. Should we be planning for this scenario in the Leeds area? And again, I'm just gonna pick on the screen. So going from the bottom of my screen to what Matthew very quickly, just to finish off for yourself.
No, I don't think we need to prepare for the end of the world. I've been reading a lot about a form of geoengineering called marine cloud brightening. This was developed by, sadly he died this year at the age of 85, Professor Stephen Salter. He developed, or tried to develop, the world's first wave generated electrical generation scheme in the 1970s called the Salter's Duck, which I used to read a lot about. It never came to fruition due to the Thatcher government and North Sea oil, sadly. But we're talking about an internationally respected emeritus professor of engineering here. And he's developed something with some colleagues called marine cloud brightening. There was a pilot project in Australia recently.
Do you want to just kind of...
Yes, basically, for less than £1 billion, he devised these wind-powered ships that would spray seawater in the air, and it would cool the planet by a whole 1 degree centigrade with no risk and minimal cost. And this is not some garden shed inventor. This is basically the engineering genius who's come up with this. And there's loads of stuff on YouTube about it. I just don't know why we don't at least have that as a contingency. You know, there are people dying there now out there of climate change. Here's a way we can slow it down. It won't stop it. It will slow it down and buy us time to get that technology in place. And yeah, so we need to look at things like this. This is not the end of the world. We have time, but we have to seriously think about marine cloud brightening, the best form of geoengineering that's yet been devised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that's been a very strong message from yourself throughout this, is about the role that you believe technology could play. And just to confirm, Reverend John's question talked about a societal collapse, not the end of the world. That was my phrase. Alex, let me come to you to kind of finish off.
Yeah, great. Look, I mean, this is something I've discussed with John a number of times. I was a founder member and vice chair of the all-party group on climate and security, and the work we've been doing is around the Sahel in Africa. And I'll give one particular example: Western Sahara, which is an area, as it's just of the Sahara, under occupation by Morocco, has effectively had that societal collapse because the geopolitics, and then there's a water scarcity and extreme temperature, and the collapse of agriculture have meant that people basically can't live there anymore. And that isn't something that we're going to see in Leeds anytime soon, probably not in any of our lifetimes, but it is something that's going to spread, particularly around the equatorial belt. And so a lot of the time we talk about mitigation, which is about reducing carbon emissions, but adaptation is now equally as important. We need to adapt places so that water scarcity, whether that's through desalination, that's whether through developing of aquifers, whatever it is, and ensuring that people can live and are adapted to their environment is absolutely vital. And one of the things that really concerns me, because there's a lot of debate in this country about the overseas development budget and overseas development assistance. That money is there and is spent, and the top priority of that is climate, so people can live in their societies. Because you know what happens when people can't live in the society, their home, they go somewhere else. And we're having a toxic debate in this country about immigration, and that immigration is only going to get worse if we have that, as John puts it, societal collapse because of rising temperatures, water scarcity, collapse of agriculture. So we have to do everything we can to support those communities so they can live where they live in their home, and that's, I think, a real big mission. That's why we want to work towards not just returning the aid budget, but also to having climate at the centre of our international aid policy.
Right, thank you. Thanks very much. Bob, again, coming to you, just that part of the question: a world of mass migration and mass starvation, should we be preparing for this scenario in the Leeds area?
Well, it's an international problem, and it won't hit Leeds first. I agree with Alex entirely on that. One thing which is very important is the energy cost of air conditioning. It's very energy expensive. That's one area of technology, along with many others, we really need to invest in. But more important than that, there's almost 100 people in this debate tonight. We're all dreamers. We're dreaming that by casting a vote and forming a policy, we can save the world. You know what? Maybe we can. But we're going to have to fight like hell. We need to be on a war footing with this. Everything that we do has to be focused on fighting climate change, setting an example in Yorkshire for the UK to follow, example in the UK for the world to follow. Someone has to lead on this. At the moment, there's too little leadership on climate change.
Right, thank you very much. Chris, Foren?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of talk of various technical fixes, and I have to say that I am deeply skeptical about these. I'm not. I don't feel doctrinaire about technical fixes. So, for example, if you need drinking water, as we did in the 1930s, a reservoir is a pretty good technical fix. But to imagine that we can escape the worst effects of catastrophic climate change by some technical fix is just so dangerous, because the fantasy allows us to think we can carry on living the way that we live now, and that is just not true. We have to change. We've got to change the way we live, really in quite major, radical ways. And I'm sorry to say, having congratulated Alex earlier on, I'm sorry to say that I just do not see that in the Labour Party programme. Their manifesto is called Change, but actually there's no change in it, and we need really serious change. We can't survive 2.8 degrees of global warming, 2.7 degrees of global warming, or anything like it. We won't be able to grow the wheat that we need, that feeds most of the world. We won't be able to grow the rice. So human civilization will just cease if we have civilization, and I guess we do in most of the world, or a lot of the world. But we really need to commit to a radical change in what we expect out of life. We can have a huge improvement in our quality of life by making small sacrifices in our material standard of living. I truly believe that. If we don't achieve that, then the future to me looks extremely nasty.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Chris Howley.
There's not much more to be said. I agree with a lot of what I've heard. I find it very disappointing that Leeds as a city is not more proactive on this. The council introduced a climate emergency agenda and a role, and yet we're still talking about airport expansion. It should have been off the cards from the very beginning. We are tinkering at the edges with the problem. And we do need to be doing far more and taking our own personal responsibility. We do need to find ways to be a bit American, leverage our own behaviours in those simple ways that Chris is referring to. And yeah, we do need to ready ourselves. We do need to look out for those people in our society who will never afford air conditioning and who do need help with affordable, and to go to a question that wasn't asked, good quality, nutritious food in a world that's got an increasing challenge on it. We need to change our thinking absolutely wholesale in this agenda.
Great, thank you very, very much. Do you know what? We are just pretty much bang in on time. Just in case any of you've missed them, I just want to read, so I will read some of the comments, but first, actually, sorry, John Swales, Reverend John, are you there? Do you want to just come back quickly on what people said? I'll just give you a moment to see whether you're there. No, okay, thank.
Oh.
Here you go. Yeah, do you want to just come back quickly on that?
Yeah, what I see is a lot of peddling of hopium that if we act now, we can avert catastrophe. Yet the sobering reality is that we are in a catastrophe, and we need to make the best of it. And I think just something that Alex has said there was saying actually Leeds, not going to miss it for within our lifetimes. Actually, we're hitting irreversible tipping points. Things are moving really, really quickly. And the least we should be doing as politicians is articulating reality as it is, not just that which we think is palatable for the public.
Lovely, thank you.
Can I just come back on that? Because
really,
John was
really
very clear about societal collapse. I don't think that in Leeds, we're talking very much in other places about societal collapse now. And I think for us to say we need to do things in Leeds, we do things in the Sahara's wrong. We need to be doing things where the things are where people are dying and people are moving today. And there is flooding, absolutely agree with that. And we're doing a huge amount on upstream flood alleviation, but but there's not enough happening in those places where they need support. That's the point I was trying.
If I can respond, I wasn't saying that this is just something we should do in Leeds and sort of let the rest burn. We need action everywhere. It's coming down the pipeline. It's coming quick, which I'm sure we agree on that, Alex. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Well, thanks very much. We're going to finish just slightly early, but I just want to read out some of the comments for all the candidates, just because you may not have seen them, because actually it's been a lot of love for you all shown and how we've done this debate and how you've all approached this in the chat. So some of the comments people have said, this is way better than the debate not on TV last night. Well done for a civilized, thoughtful discussion. Thank you to somebody else says here. Thank you to all the candidates for thoughtful and honest answers as well. People saying much more realistic in this debate, not the media brouhaha on trivial issues. Very refreshing to have actual discussion rather than the usual TV-based shouting debates. Agree with the comments. The tone of the discussion has been much better than some of the election debate. So I mean, we have kind of borrowed the rules a little bit from the presidential, the POTUS presidential election that's going to be happening. I think, is it 2 o'clock in the morning our time, if anyone can bear to stand up, because they have decided to turn the mics off so that I think that so that basically so Trump can't shout over Joe Biden, I think is the the decisions on that. I think last night's debate would have been very different had they turned the mics off. But I know it's frustrating for people who want to debate and kind of come back on things. But if I can thank everybody for kind of being so respectful, giving their answers, being so concise as well. Thank you for all the fantastic questions that we've had. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to go to them. And thank you for all the chat. The chat has been really great because you've been discussing about some really complex issues in that chat. It's been really fantastic to read it as we go along. So can I just remind everybody that there are other parties standing in this election in Leeds. Details can be found on the BBC's website. Also on the council website, if you go, you can see a list of all the candidates standing in all the constituencies. This has been organised by a number of different organisations in Leeds. So huge thanks to everybody who's been involved in the organisation and the ideas to put this event on. Climate Action Leeds are going to be publishing this recording on YouTube soon. They will send everybody the link. At the start, you showed a lot of love in the reactions for Mohammed Hussein, the children's mayor, and wasn't he fantastic as well? He said at the start, let's kind of just remember this as well, that children are the ones who are going to have to deal with the implications and the impact of this. He talked about a Leeds that was cleaner and greener, healthier and happier, and I think that is definitely we all want. He said listen and make good choices. So whichever of you get elected, please listen and make good choices. And lastly, everybody, if you haven't voted yet, don't forget to go and vote next Thursday. And I think that kind of brings us up to the end. I can see Chris his hand up.
Yeah, I thought we were having closing comments.
You are absolutely right. We are having closing comments. I'm sorry, I've gone too quickly ahead of that. Thank you very much. Well, tell you what, Chris, make your closing comments. You can go first.
Okay, thank you. 52 years ago, the Green Party was founded to protect the natural world, and the need for that is more pressing now than it ever was. It's already been said, we have one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. And the Green Party people understand that when we damage the natural world, we damage ourselves. We understand that it's the duty of all of us to defend the natural beauty and the fecundity of this earth. And we need to defend it against our own greed and our own stupidity. Labour can't do that. And I'm glad we had a discussion about growth, because I think that Labour at the moment is obsessed with economic growth at any cost. Last year, Rachel Reeves said to her party, we stand with the builders, not the blockers. And she wants to redesignate some greenbelt land as something called grey belt so that it can be built on. It's clear that Labour will carry on supporting private motoring and aviation, which are the two least sustainable forms of transport. And they're doing that because of the holy grail of growth. We are already a wealthy country. The cost of living crisis is in reality a crisis of inequality. And we need to have fairer shares of that wealth. We can have prosperity without growth. 56 years ago, Robert Kennedy made a memorable speech. I wish I had time to quote it all, but he said, GDP measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Chris. Alex Sobel, your minute for closing statements.
I'm going to take a slightly different approach. I think it's really important that in the political sphere, we have consensus on the urgent need for climate action. We saw that at some points tonight, and other points that sort of fell apart a little bit. There are a couple of major parties who will get millions of votes in this election. I'm not going to predict how many seats, who have gone either never been part of that reform, or have definitely veered away from it in the case of the Conservative Party. For us to be able to take the action we need, I'm afraid to say all the parties in the country, groups who might not know who they are, but they're groups which have to involve the governing party. So in the last 14 years, that's obviously the Conservative.
Oh, we've cut out again, Alex. Do you want to just finish off?
And 5 years to Dems and opposition.
Okay, so I think unfortunately, Alex, you just kind of cutting out at the end there, but I think you were talking about consensus and and working with everyone. Is that right? Is that what? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Chris Howley, your minute closing statement.
I'll try and be brief. When I joined the Liberal Democrats, which is many, many years ago, when I had no grey hair, it was actually a revelation to me how forward-thinking the party was and still is on climate change. If you actually look at the manifestos, there is very little difference between the Green Party manifesto on this and our manifesto. It is absolutely at the heart of where we stand as a party. My greatest fear with our new government is that it is not going to rise to the challenge. It is not going to be daring enough. It's not going to have the courage to challenge big industry when it needs to challenge, and it's not going to make the right level of investment and help us as a society to change. We have to change as a society, and we need to be the start of that. And I really just hope that the next government makes the effort that I don't think it's going to do, quite frankly.
Thank you. Thanks very much there, Chris. Matthew, for the Social Democratic Party, your minute.
Well, listening to the other parties, I agree. We agree with a lot of their policies. We have them in our own manifesto. But I just think the SDP would get to net zero for this country and to help it for the rest of the world quicker, because we will put in place that technology and things that they shun, like nuclear energy. Which, by the way, if it's done on a big scale, is not actually more expensive, as France and South Korea have demonstrated over the years. We just want stuff that works. I'm not interested in doing it for show, and we are against this unilateralist approach that isn't actually going to do anything other than just make us feel good for 5 minutes. It's not really going to solve anything if we alone don't do an activity like flying or mining for gas. It's not going to make any difference. The technological solution is what we favour. And for that reason, I am very proud to be a member of the SDP. It was like a breath of fresh air for me when I came across the party, because I don't agree with the climate activists, and I don't agree with your sort of Donald Trump denialists. I just want this problem sorting out and using any means possible just to save lives.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthew. And Bob Buxton, Yorkshire Party, your minute.
The UK has a very small proportion of the world's population, and of course Yorkshire smaller still. So what does it matter what we do? And the answer is to set an example, to show it's not a choice between economic benefit and environmental benefit. They go hand in hand completely. We have to show this. We've had great innovators, Alan Turing, for example. We can do this. We have that inventiveness, that essential quality to do this. I teach engineering apprentices. I was speaking to one guy at Hustings 2 days ago who was interested in basically greener homes, all sorts of great innovations. Who's now going to look at my employer and perhaps become an apprentice. We have that passion for it. Another of my apprentices turned down an apprenticeship because they use plastic cups. Young people are very enthusiastic about the environment. We can do it. We have to show economic benefits of a greener Britain for a greener planet. We can do this.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have come bang up right to the end, and we just pretty much bang on time. Can I also thank the people who behind the scenes have been making all this work? We've got Simon, we've got Helen, we've got Caroline, who have been helping behind the scenes. So thank you all for doing that. Also Nick, who was involved in the organisation. Thanks to everyone who attended. I think a figure went in at one point, we had 91 people as part of the Hustings, which is absolutely brilliant. Again, thank you to Mohammed Hussein for kicking us off so brilliantly as well. There was one comment, I'm just looking back through the comments there. This is from Paul. Well done, everyone, for an intelligent and caring discussion. And I think if we've got that, we're doing pretty well. So thanks, everybody, for giving up their time. Don't forget to go and vote if you haven't voted already. We'll maybe see you if there's another general election at some point in the future. Thanks very much, everyone.
And thank you to the hosts. Thank you.